The day was finally here. Princess sat inside the grand carriage, the gentle rocking of the wheels on the cobblestone roads doing nothing to ease her nerves, as it led to the kingdom of Eldoria. She stared out the small window, taking in the unfamiliar sights of the kingdom she would now call home. Tall towers, decorated with colorful flags, reached toward the sky, and people gathered on the streets, cheering as the carriage passed. They were welcoming their new princess, their future queen. But all she could think about was the man waiting for her inside those grand stone walls. She was to marry Prince Jungkook, the youngest son of the Eldoria king. She never met him before, only heard about his character. Some said he was always cold, a man of few words and don't let emotions control him. Others say he was carefree, almost playful, with a hidden warmth only in the company of those he trusted. He was unlike the other princes, less concerned with the formalities of court life, and more interested in exploring the world beyond the palace walls. That's what confused her. How could one man be both cold and carefree? Was Hetrali as stern as the rumors claimed, or was there a softer side to him that few had seen? She couldn't help but wonder which version of Prince Jungkook she would encounter as his wife. Would he be a man who kept her at arm's length, or would he show her the warmth hidden beneath his composed exterior? As a princess, she had always known that her marriage would be arranged, that she would view to strengthen alliances and secure peace between other kingdoms. But knowing didn't make it any easier. Where she came from, it was common for men to take more than one wife. Her own father had several, each one competing for his attention and favor. Growing up in that environment, she had seen the jealousy, the sadness in the eyes of my mother and the other wives. She wondered if Prince Jungkook would be the same, if he would take other women after her, or if he would be different. Would he be kind? Or would he be harsh like some of the men in my father's court? As the carriage came to a stop, she took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of trying to consume her. The door opened, revealing her older brother, Seokjin, standing there with a warm smile. His smile was like a lifeline she wants to hold onto. He extended his hand toward her. "Come on, little sister," Seokjin said. "You're not backing out now, are you? I thought you were braver." She couldn't help but smile as she placed her hand in his. Her older brother always been Thean to lift her spirits, even when things seemed their darkest. He was more than just a brother to her, he was her best friend, the one person she could fully rely on. "You've got the wrong princess, because I'm not brave, at least not right now," she replied, trying to mask her nerves. "But if you promise not to let go, I think I can manage. Seokjin, I've got you, always have, always will. Besides, I have to make sure you don't trip in front of all these people and embarrass the family name." She rolled her eyes as her feet landed on the cobblestone path, leading to her new life. "You know," Seokjin continued, leaning in to whisper as they began walking toward the grand entrance of the castle. "If this prince of yours gives you any trouble, you just let me know. I can always take you back home." She smiled as her nerves began to calm a little. "That's why you're my favorite brother." "Hey, I'm right here, you little," Namjoon's voice came from behind as he appeared beside them, having just caught up. She turned to look at her other brother, Namjoon, who was giving her a mock glare. "Oops, did I say that out loud?" Seokjin chuckled, pulling her a little closer. "Don't worry, June, you'll always be her second favorite. There's no shame in silver." She laughed, feeling the warmth of her brother's love surround her. "Thank you, both of you. I'm really lucky to have you." Seokjin gave Namjoon a knowing look. "Of course you are. Now, let's get you inside before Prince Jungkook wonders where his bride is." Hawaiian wedding dress flowed gracefully behind her as she walked, the soft silk and lace brushing gently against the polished marble floor, as she stepped inside the large hall of castle. The gown was a beautiful shade of ivory, embroidered with delicate golden threads that caught the light with every step she took. The dress hugged her figure perfectly, cinching at the waist before cascading down in layers of soft, white fabric. The train of her dress trailed elegantly behind her. A thin veil covered her face, though it did little to hide her beauty. She appeared calm and confident, her chin held high as she made her way into the hall, but inside, her nerves were still fluttering. The guests turned to watch as she entered, their eyes awed in admiration. But the princess barely noticed them. Her focus was on the path ahead, and on the figure waiting at the end of it. Then, her eyes met his. Prince Jungkook stood at the far end of the hall, waiting for her at the altar. He was dressed in traditional royal attire, a deep navy blue coat with silver embroidery, perfectly tailored to his strong frame. His broad shoulders were draped in a royal cape, lined with fur, and a silver chain hung from his chest, marking his status as the youngest prince of Eldoria. Her steps faltered for just a second under his dark and intense, her nerves threatening to overwhelm her again, but she quickly steadied herself. As she drew nearer, she could see the small smile tugging at the corners of Prince's lips, a small yet comforting expression that made her feel a little more at ease. He didn't look like the intimidating prince she had feared. Instead, there was something gentle and kind the way he was looking at her. As she finally reached the altar, she paused, her heartbeat fastening as she looked up at him. He was even more handsome up close. He extended his hand toward her. When she placed her smaller hand into his, she felt a rush of warmth spread through her, goosebumps across her. His hand was larger and firmer, his fingers wrapping around hers made her wonder if he felt the same spark she did. For a moment, the world around them seemed to still as she stepped closer, now standing face to face with him. Her breath caught in her throat, and she dared to look up into his eyes once more. That's when she noticed his eyes. They were dark and deep, like a midnight sky full of secrets. Intense, yet there was a softness in them that made her feel safe. His gaze held warmth, almost like a silent promise that he would take care of her. There was a subtle tightening of his grip, as if he didn't want to let go, and a small, almost imperceptible smile played on his lips. The priest raised his hands. "Dearly beloved," he began, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of Princess Hwan of the Kingdom of Amara and Prince Jungkook, the youngest son of the Kingdom of Eldoria. This marriage is not only a joining of two hearts, but a bond that will unite two kingdoms in peace and prosperity." They both exchanged glances. Her eyes fall on her brothers who were watching them with a warm smile. The priest continued, "Marriage is a sacred vow, a promise to love and cherish each other through all of life's trials and joys. It is a bond that brings two souls together, creating a union that will endure." The priest turned to Jungkook. "Prince Jungkook, do you take Princess Hwan to be your lawfully wedded wife, to love and cherish her, and to stand by her side in all things for as long as you both shall live?" "I do." He spoke without any hint of hesitation. He then turned to Hwan. "Princess Hwan, do you take Prince Jungkook to be your lawfully wedded husband, to love and honor him for as long as you both shall live?" "I do." She spoke, voice low. At least she managed to say those words without stuttering. Next came the exchange of vows. They both spoke words of commitment. After the vows, Jungkook took her hand gently, sliding a beautifully crafted band onto her finger. The ring was a delicate gold circle. She then placed a matching ring on Jungkook's finger, her hand trembling slightly as she did so. The final part of the ceremony involved the sealing of their union. The priest poured a small amount of sacred water over their clasped hands, a ritual meant to cleanse and sanctify their marriage. "By the power vested in me by the gods and the traditions of Eldoria, I now pronounce you husband and wife." This was it. She was finally married to Jungkook. They shared a look as they turned to face the crowd. The hall erupted in cheers and applause, with guests rising to their feet and showering them with blessings and good wishes. She saw her brothers walking towards them after they walked down the altar. Seokjin and Namjoon made their way toward them, their faces lit up with broad smiles. "Congratulations, little sister," Seokjin said, wrapping her in a warm hug. "See, it wasn't that difficult. And remember what I told you, right?" Namjoon grinned as he offered his hand to Jungkook. "Take good care of her, Jungkook. She's the most precious thing we have. Don't make me come back here with a sword." Jungkook accepted his handshake with a respectful nod. "I'll do my best. Thank you for the warm welcome." Jungkook's older brother, Prince Hoseok, and his wife, Princess Hain, approached. Hoseok's eyes were friendly and his smile genuine as he greeted Hwan. Welcome to the family, Princess Yn, Hoseok said warmly. I'm sure you'll find Eldoria to be a wonderful place. If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask. Princess Hain added with a soft smile, we are so glad to have you here. I'm sure you and Jungkook will make a lovely couple. Yn smiled gratefully at them, feeling a bit more at ease with each friendly gesture. Yn followed Princess Hain through the grand halls of the castle, her heart still racing from the events of the day. It was tiring. When they reached her room, Hain opened the large wooden doors. This is Prince Jungkook's room, Hain said. The room was enormous, with high ceilings and grand windows that allowed the moonlight to flood in. The bed in the center of the room was covered in rich, dark fabrics. It was a room fit for royalty, Prince Jungkook's room, as Hain had mentioned, and Yn could immediately see how beautiful and elegant it was. But knowing that this was where she would be spending her first night with her husband only made her more anxious. Her attention quickly shifted to a dress laid out on a nearby chaise lounge. It was a gown of the finest silk, shimmering in shade of soft peach. The fabric looked smooth and delicate, and the dress was adorned with intricate lace and tiny pearls. Her heart raced as she thought about changing into it. This is for tonight. Hain spoke following her gaze. For her, the thought of having to look perfect, to be ready for her husband, was too macabre. She stared at the dress. What if he didn't like her? What if she didn't meet his expectations? Yn knew that Jungkook was a prince, and she couldn't help but think of all the women he must have spent time with before her. She had seen it in her own castle, how men of high rank would entertain many women without a second thought. It was a normal part of royal life, but the idea made her feel sick. What if she wasn't enough for him? What if she couldn't make him happy? Just then, the door opened, and a group of maids entered the room, ready to help prepare her for the night. Their presence only heightened her anxiety. Her heart was in her throat as they began to fuss over her, arranging the dress and preparing her hair. Yn, Hain said softly, I can see that you're worried. If you have any questions or if there's anything you want to talk about, you can ask me. I'm here to help. Says Yn, you are truly beautiful, one of the maids said with a warm smile, as she gently slid the dress off her shoulders. Yes, your highness, you look like a vision tonight. Prince Jungkook is very lucky to have such a beautiful bride.Yn's heart continued to race, but she managed a small smile in return, trying to take comfort in their kind words. They slipped the silk dress over her, the cool fabric felt soft against her skin, almost like a second layer of nerves. Everything about you is perfect, one more added, adjusting the dress to fit her frame just right. You'll take his breath away, I'm sure of it. She nodded slightly, trying to believe them. Jungkook stood outside his room, as the guards bowed and opened the door for him. He stepped inside, and a familiar scent filled his nose, a delicate fragrance that he had recently grown addicted to. Closing his eyes for a moment, he inhaled deeply, savoring the comforting aroma that now felt like a part of his life. He opened his eyes, scanning the room, searching for the source of the scent. His gaze softened, and a smile made its way at the corners of his lips when he finally spotted her. His wife was standing near the railing by the large windows, bathed in the soft glow of the moonlight. She wore a light peach nightdress that flowed gently around her, adding to her ethereal presence. She looked lost in her thoughts, unaware of his presence, as she gazed out at the night sky. He took a moment to simply admire her. There was something about her that drew him in, something more than just her beauty. It was the way she seemed both strong and delicate, confident yet shy. He found himself wanting to know more, to understand the thoughts that occupied her mind. Quietly, he walked over to the table near the wall, where a bottle of their famous red drink rested. He poured the deep crimson liquid into 2 glasses. Taking the glass in his hands, he made his way toward her slowly, not wanting to disturb the peaceful atmosphere. He cleared his throat softly as he approached her, before calling out her name. Yn. She turned around, a little surprised to see him there, her eyes widening slightly. Your Highness, she greeted him, her voice soft and respectful. He smiled gently at her formality, shaking his head just a bit. There's no need for that, he said. There was a certain warmth in his tone. You can call me Jungkook. She nodded, knowing it would be difficult anytime soon calling him by his name without his titler, at least tonight. Jungkook extended one of the glasses to her, his eyes locked on hers. You want drink? She hesitated for a moment, her fingers hovering over the glass before she finally accepted it. Their fingers brushed briefly, sending a small jolt through her that made her heart skip a beat. Thank you, she whispered. If you don't mind, can I ask what got you so lost in thoughts? She was startled by the sudden question, her eyes blinking rapidly as she turned to face him. She hadn't expected him to speak, let alone ask her something so personal. Oh, she hesitated, feeling a bit shy under his attentive gaze. I was just thinking about everything, I suppose. The wedding, the new kingdom, and you. He smiled at her honesty, feeling a warmth spread through him. I can understand that. It's a lot to take in all at once. He paused for a moment, trying to ease her nerves. I was nervous too, you know. Marrying someone you've never met, it's not easy. She looked at him, surprised by his admission. You were nervous. He chuckled softly, nodding. Of course. I didn't know what to expect. But seeing you now, I feel relieved. She looked down, feeling her heart race. He looked into her eyes, his expression softening. I know this marriage is arranged, and wedded and T have a chance to speak properly before all of this. But I want you to know that I'm looking forward to getting to know you better. And I promise, I'll do everything in my power to make you feel comfortable and safe. Her felt her heart flutter, touched by his words. He was so different from the distant, cold prince she feared. Instead, he was warm and caring, and his sincerity was evident in every word he spoke. Thank you. That means a lot to me. She replied, her voice soft. So tell me something about yourself, princess. He asked as he looked ahead, sipping on his drink. Something about me, she said, thinking for a moment. She wasn't used to talking about herself, especially not with someone she barely knew. But now this someone was her husband. Well, I love spending time in the garden, she finally began. Not just walking through it, but actually getting my hands dirty, planting flowers and herbs. There's something so calming about watching things grow, knowing that with a little care and patience, something beautiful can come to life. That sounds peaceful. I never would have guessed that about you, but it suits you. He said, and she smiled slightly at the compliment. It's always been my escape, she admitted. Whenever things got overwhelming at the palace, I'd go to the garden. It's where I feel most like myself. He nodded. I can see why you'd find comfort in that. It's like having a small piece of control in a world that's often out of our hands. Yan looked at him, surprised by how easily he seemed to understand her. Exactly, she said, feeling more at ease with him. What about you, Your Highness? She said. What do you do when you want to escape? I like to ride, he confessed. Whenever I need to clear my head, I take my horse out and just ride. It's freeing, you know. No walls, no expectations. Just me and the open land. She nodded, picturing him riding through the fields, wind in his hair, completely free. That sounds peaceful. Wonderful, she said, and he slightly chuckled. Maybe one day, I'll take you with me, he suggested. She felt her heart skip a beat at the thought. I'd like that, she replied, her voice almost awe-whisper. There was something about the way he spoke, the way he looked at her, that made her feel at ease, like she could actually imagine a future where they shared these moments together. He smiled, clearly pleased by her response. Did you like our room? He asked, wanting to keep the conversation flowing. She looked behind her and nodded. It's beautiful. I can see you put a lot of thought into it. It's very welcoming. I'm glad you think so. Do you like dark colors? He asked. She tilted her head slightly. I do. If you'd like, we could change it to something lighter. I wouldn't mind at all. He offered, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely keen on the idea. She shook her head, still meeting his gaze. No, it's beautiful just as it is. Even though I prefer lighter colors, a lot different from what I used to, but there's something about this room that feels right. It has its own warmth. I like that, he said, his eyes softening. She blinked, caught off guard by his sudden words. He took a step closer, his gaze never leaving from hers. I like how you keep eye contact while talking and sharing your thoughts with me. It's refreshing. Her cheeks flushed at the compliment, and she instinctively looked away, feeling shy. He placed his thumb and finger on her chin, guiding her face back to his. Don't look away, he said softly. I want to see every part of you. Touch of his fingers on her skin sent a shiver down her spine, and her heart beat faster. He leaned in slightly, his voice low, smooth like silk. You make me feel like I'm seeing the world for the first time. Your honesty, your eyes, the way you talk about your interests, it's all so captivating. Her breath hitched in her throat, and she felt a rush of butterflies in her stomach. She looked deep at him, unable to tear her gaze away from his intense, yet tender eyes. I think this is going to be my favorite thing about you, he continued, his eyes locking onto hers with a soft intensity. You can make me do anything with those eyes of yours. Her heart raced as if it might leap from her chest. The way he spoke, the depth of his gaze, it all seemed to wrap around her like a comforting embrace. Every word he said seemed to resonate deeply within her, amplifying the butterflies that fluttered wildly in her stomach. He was so close to hers that she didn't realize when the distance between them closed. She could feel his body warmth against her. Wyan, he said softly, is it all right if I? He let his words trail off, his eyes asking for permission as he hovered close to her, eyes fixed on her lips. Her nerves were on edge, but she wanted nothing more than for him to close the distance. With a deep breath, she nodded. He closed the remaining distance between them, his fingers gently gripping her waist as his lips met hers. Slowly, he pressed his lips against hers, and the contact was electric. She felt her body melt at the contact. Her small hand instinctively gripped his shirt, pulling him closer, as if trying to anchor herself to the moment. He pressed his LPS onto hers in a series of soft, affectionate pecks. Made her heart race and her breath hitch. She could hardly believe how sweet and perfect it felt. The continuous, tender kisses made her feel cherished, but at the same time, she couldn't help but feel jealousy. She wondered how many other women had experienced his LPS before her. He looked at her, and she swore she could almost see the faint blush on his cheeks, and she could feel her flushed from head to toe. I have something for you, he said softly, trying to hide the nervousness in his voice. Wait here,